Here's the thing about artificial intelligence. It's no longer becoming a futuristic concept, but rather an essential tool that helps businesses to better innovate, operate, and compete. According to the 2025 State of AI report by McKinsey Company, it's estimated that 78% of all organizations across America today use AI to complete at least one business function, which is a significant increase from the 55% recorded just a year ago. While adoption is certainly accelerating, that doesn't mean that organizations still don't struggle with moving beyond experimentation and create measurable business value as a result of their AI investment. In this episode of Let's Have This Conversation, I had the opportunity to sit down with my friend Danny Carpio. He is an organizational architect, systems builder, attorney, and partner in Veri. For more than 13 years, he's been designing governance structures, operating systems, and coordination frameworks which allow organizations to scale effectively in complex and rapidly changing environments. Throughout the course of his career, Carpio has worked across decentralized organizations, venture-backed startups, and multi-entity networks, helping teams to raise and manage eight-figure capital pools, incubate businesses, and build operating systems that others could replicate. His experiences lie across the intersection of organizational design, operational excellence, and emerging technologies, particularly creating the AI infrastructure that businesses need to compound growth rather than simply automating tasks. Carpio explores the question why so many companies are rushing to adopt AI without first putting into place the operating systems they need to be successful from a foundational basis. We also explore the idea and the concept behind using AI as a productivity tool and integrating it as an operating layer. The challenges leaders face when attempting to scale AI initiatives, and why things like governance systems, human coordination, and remain critical in an increasingly automated world. And Carpio joined me this week to tell me more. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Kidding. But Danny, if you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program. And I'm super excited to learn how you combine organizational architecture, AI, business, and entrepreneurship all into one. It's great to see you, my friend. And happy Thursday to you.
Yes, likewise. Likewise on all fronts.
Absolutely. So, Danny, I know you're a systems and operational guy, and you've been putting together, organizational systems, both in government structure and organizationally. So I'm curious, what do you think it means to have a well-oiled organizational structure which will eventually lead to success? My friend, what are your thoughts there?
Oh man, I have a lot of thoughts there. I think the first thought is we have to revisit everything we thought we knew about these things, right? So I've been doing this, a long time, relatively speaking, right? But so much has changed even over the course of that time, and then just even now, right? We look at just over the last year, maybe even 6 months, right? The operating realities and assumptions for what it takes to be well oiled um, are completely changed, right? To the extent that what you're putting oil into is now has to look differently, right? Right now, people are putting oil into old machines that don't take that oil anymore, so to speak, right? Just carrying on your analogy, and so I think um, what success starts with right now is um, dispelling and removing yourself from the assumptions of what you think is necessary uh, to succeed and what is possible, and how to achieve it. And so I think the the well-oiled machine, so to speak, requires a fresh new look at what we think we are even doing and what the environment permits and what it optimizes for. And so I think that is that's what is happening right now, and success starts with that fundamental perspective change of what is this modern operating environment? What am I doing, and how do I do it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, my friend, you've also worked with companies that bring in eight figures, and you've helped them to really understand the patterns that separate organizations that scale successfully from the ones that collapse under their own complexity or pressure, my friend. So tell me your thoughts on what sort of, what helps an organization create great patterns in order to scale at mass. My friend, what are your thoughts there?
I love this question. I think it's a good logical build on what we just were talking about, which is we have to look at what we're actually trying to do. I like to think about it this way, right? Is a scaled, successful commercial outcome is, let's call it, from zero to success. And there's competition here, right? And the market will decide how you get there and how you do it, and luck and all the factors of start to commercial success and whatever scale you're talking about. It can be a mom and pop. It can just be a lemonade stand, anything. It can be an enterprise, whatever that is. It's this distance. The composition of what that took and what it looked like and the operating architecture, the market had rationalized and given us generalized blueprints. And our whole system is designed around operating within that general bumper system, a lot of it provided to us structurally. Now, that composition is completely flipped upside down, so to speak. What was hard that the market rationalized around, in large part, has become very easy to do. It doesn't mean it's you're good at it, but you can create outputs easily and very cheaply with a lot of those things that kept people from accomplishing that scale, right, to get here. But the overall difficulty is still the same. Things are still hard. That distance is still the same. The composition in it is different. So I think it starts with looking at where hard has moved. And so we have to look at what is now difficult, right? And what are the patterns within those areas that are now difficult so that you can achieve the success you want. And so on that base, I think it starts with feedback loops. Now, feedback loops, I think, are not novel concepts, but they're increasingly critical infrastructure for any serious operation at any scale. Whatever you're trying to do, if you want to scale those outputs, you have to have really, really good, really, really dynamic and very tight feedback loops across time horizons. Because, again, what is easy now, so to speak, is to create outputs. People can just create things. So now that is a democratization event, of course, but it's also a major risk to operational success because people can just go off the rails. I think I'm everyone's doing it. I think we're seeing it in the news. These enterprises don't know how to do it. People, when you start using it, anyone can just go off the rails with it. When it's easy to do stuff, you have to have tight feedback loops and bumper systems to keep you in line. And so it starts with having a fundamentally different, now optimal operating architecture that's anchored and wrapped around dynamic feedback loops on how and what you do with time architecture and how you scale within a networked infrastructure that you create and that you interact with, where everyone else can do those easy things too, right? And so I think the pattern that we can keep, despite all of the changes, that is critical infrastructure right now is feedback loop integrity. I call it design, manage, and operate. That is just a mental model. You don't have to call it that, but the idea is that you have to be able to step back as a dispassionate observer across all your time horizons. What am I going to do today and why? And how am I doing it? How am I accomplishing it? What did my last day or my last week tell me? And have that feedback loop. Then you have to be able to manage it, and then you have to be able to execute it. And then you have to take that feedback loop to the next day, into the week, into the year, month, into the year, and into your macro goal cycle, always iterating and improving. And so that DMO feedback loop is probably the one string of critical infrastructure or pattern, to use your word, that will be featured in any success of successful scale from now forward. It will be because they had those feedback loops.
Yeah, absolutely. And Danny, I'm curious to ask you about the role of AI in operating systems and how it sort of disrupted how we think about organizational architecture and operating systems. What are your thoughts on the advancement of AI and how it's assisted and how it's also hindered the work that you've done? So what's your thoughts on AI and organizational architecture, my friend?
So I think we have to get used to it. I think one of the parts of the dialogue that I just don't like engaging with at all, but it's just there because I think it's easy and lazy, right? Is ending with some sort of fear of job loss. Now, those are realities that will be happening, and they are happening. But we can't dismiss them either. And so there's this sense that we can just either be scared or dismiss it and stop the conversation there. But I want to move the conversation much deeper into practical realities, like what you just mentioned. And the reality is AI is accelerating and exposing that the old way of creating scaled economic outputs is no longer the optimal way. That structural, hierarchical, firm institution structure that we all are, know and love, that worked so long, that the market rationalized around, that way of doing has lost now, and there is a new optimal way to do it. And that is because of a lot of technological innovations, but now being exposed and enabled and pulled to the forefront by AI and its advancements and its accelerating advancements. And so it is changing everything. Primarily, it has changed what is possible and what is the optimal way to compete and scale desired economic outputs. So that, my friend, is very empowering, because where scale has moved, the optimal unit of scale is now smaller. It is now the individual and small teams. Those teams don't have to take those same trade-offs that made the firm structure possible. And so I think the primary takeaway is that it's not going away, and that it has changed the underlying assumptions first of what is possible and how you can do it optimally. And so we have to move towards where hard is now. So that means we have to go look at what was how things had to be operationally, and now totally revisit that. And so what that means, when scale is now at the individual, then that means it's now an individual task and a small team task in order to create custom systems of scale for yourself. And so this is not just over technify yourself and just become a robot. We're people, right? And so operating systems are not just applications. It's how do you interact with the tools that enable scale such that you can compete optimally. And if you do not learn to do that and take agency over those outcomes and build differently, then you're going to fail, right? And so that is a risk that is not meant to create fear, right? It's an empowering, liberating thing, democratizing thing, but it requires work, and it's certainly not easy.
Yeah, and I know that in your work, whether you're working with startups or venture-backed companies or service-based organizations or across decentralized networking, it all is tied back to one central question. And you're concerned with the question on how can a small enterprises scale or perform at enterprise scale, my friend. And I'm wondering why you're concerned about that question and what you want people to do.
So I have always just disagreed with the old deal, right? That this idea that I had to go work for someone for 40 years, and maybe I can retire and spend time with my family when I'm 65, maybe, in an environment where inflation is running rampant. The deal just felt like a lie to me, honestly, the entire time. And so I actually disagreed with the premise from the get-go. Now, what that resulted in was it was still the best way to do things because that's what the system allowed for. And so I ended up just going off and doing my own way. A lot of working outside of the traditional rails, with a lot of friction, but a lot of success. And now what I'm seeing is a lot of compounding. And so I think fundamentally, I think it's scale for who, right? The enterprise scale is who are you scaling when you do that? Those the value accrual, it's an arbitrage mechanism, right? Enterprise scale, the way that these things scale, are a very small fraction of people capture value that they arbitrage. Now, that doesn't mean they're bad people, right? That is a skill. They operated with what within the systems that the economic realities and operating realities optimized for, and they had good ideas. They worked incredibly hard, and so these are not bad people, right? But this is just meant to say that was a deal I did not want. Now, why is that important? Is twofold. I think number one is there's a mass dependency on a systemic structure whose foundational rationale is gone, right? So in other words, these organizations that in the United States employ or otherwise create economic reliance and systems downstream, whether it's supply chain contract, all that, we're talking about more than 100 million people in the United States that rely on these structures. And it's a relatively small group of people that create all of these opportunities that people are dependent on. And so when they behave in survival mode and need to economically rationalize their operating structure to compete in markets, the blast radius is incredibly large, right? So there's a systemic risk to a lot of people who depend on these structures, whose foundation are now changed, and it's sort of crumbling around them, right? And so that is an urgency, not a fear, right? It's an urgency to do something about it, to acknowledge that it's different, and to understand that you need to prepare yourself, but also, more importantly, the thing that created their risk is a benefit for you as an individual. It's a democratization event. The things that they are doing as they try to survive are actually better used by you. You create value. You are valuable, and you can create outputs, and you can go compete in markets in whatever it is that you're doing, whatever scale, not necessarily a startup, right? Everything is a market, so to speak, right? Economically. So now you can go do that much easier because the operating environment now favors that. And so it's a paradigm shift that is very important for people to understand, and also a empowering. Don't get stuck on fear. It can be alarming, and it's jarring, and it's difficult. The volatility of this new environment is not going away. It's probably going to get worse. It's as far as like changes, but there's an empowerment layer through it that now you're not just stuck on a wave. You can go do stuff. You can move faster. You can just go do things. And so I think that's sort of like my impetus there. having been operating this way, now realizing that now it is better, and what used to be really harder for me to do than my peers with in order to create these outcomes I wanted, right? These compound and like capture my time and scale my time, all the things that I talk about in the book and that I talk about on Twitter and that I'm talking about now. Those things are now architecturally optimal. Anyone can do that, right? But it's still hard, and so that's why this is important to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And Danny, just before I ask you about your book, I wanted to get your perspective on the role diversity, equity, and inclusion plays in organizational architecture and structure and creating a culture of success. How do you think people with disabilities and inclusion in general can upsell or upstart an organizational culture? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, I think that we need to create systems that anyone can go leverage and create value for themselves, their families, their communities, and their societies. And so I think from an organizational standpoint, I think that this, again, it's a mass democratization event. So from a diverse, the technological capacities are in effect a inclusion event. So, right, there are mass blocks of people, and you highlighted disability, folks with disabilities, right? There are things that anyone can do now that they otherwise could not do to express themselves. And it's not just limited to AI, but for example, Neuralink, right? Something that that is giving paralyzed people mobility, right? Things that are allowing folks to start businesses with technology from wherever they are. And so nothing will be perfect in that sense. As far as there's always going to be difficulties, I think, for certain groups of individuals to interact with those. And our task, as we reorganize around these technologies, is to ensure that there is an access point and there are resource nodes, and that I believe the market will rationalize those things. I don't think that we're going to be able to depend on government to build those resources for us. I think we need to be armed locally with our communities, with community leaders, with individuals and groups who build these things and abstract away complexity and things that, because just having access is not enough, right? You have to have knowledge, competency, some other level of capital, even if it's not a financial capital. It certainly is knowledge capital. It's lived experience, it's teams, it's networks. And so I think the market will rationalize that. Like I'm part of it. I'll give you an example. I think those groups of people who are going to be impacted by this negatively, right? There are competency gaps, and I don't care where you come from. There's a competency gap when you have depended on certain structures that have changed or that are blocking you out, and now you have to go do things on yourself, or not have to, but you want to. You still have to know how, and there's a big gap there. My approach is I'm abstracting away systems of scale for people in an industry specific manner, such that they can go execute these things more easily and create and capture the value for themselves. There are dynamics in networks where it's easy for us. It's also easy for extractive players. I'm a positive sum person. And so what you're saying is very important to me. I think the best way to handle it is to throw your hat in the ring, empower other people who want to act in positive sum ways for their communities, knowing that we are better when we lift each other up and we create systems of access, because then that lets good ideas, right? When we don't let people access things and do things, innovation is stifled. And so that's sort of long story long.
I know, but it totally is accurate, because when you create effective systems, it makes everybody's job easier, doesn't it?
Yeah, I hope so. The key word is effective, right? And I think some people are just building systems, and just having a system is not good enough. The system has to work for the people, right? And so that's key, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about your new book. It's called, or your upcoming book called The Unfirm, my friend. The new unit of scale is you. And in the book, you argue that individuals now have the ability to scale themselves without relying on traditional firm structures. That we've talked a little bit about this, but what does self-scale actually mean, and why do you believe it's replacing the old institutional model, my friend? Tell me about that, and tell me about your book, buddy.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm going to take those in reverse because I think the second answer will make the first answer to your question more clear. And so the fundamental issue is that we're in sort of a moment where underlying assumptions, like we talked about earlier, about modern operating realities and possibilities and how to achieve scaled outcomes, that is all different. But what we have sitting on top of it, in addition to systems of dependencies that we talked about, is at its core a form function mismatch, right? The thing does not work optimally on top of the new reality, but the new version is undefined and TBD as far as what it's going to look like, right? All we know is that the old thing is not optimal and will lose, and has already lost. It's just it's a lagging indicator. And when I started writing the book, this was more theoretical, but just even now, we are seeing the leading indicators in these very scaled large institutions, right? So whether it's Block that used to be Square and Jack Dorsey, Meta, Cloudflare, Coinbase, Salesforce, these companies, especially the first people on the ladder, they aren't just talking about layoffs. They are talking about structural redesign, right? They have diagnosed the problem correctly, my friend, right? And that problem is that they are structured organizationally in a way that is dead. And they are trying to survive and thrive in their competitive markets where they are competing at their level. And they are thinning out their operating infrastructure, going into modular approaches that are focused on very bespoke and custom AI deployment into specific units, individuals, and teams. They call them different things, but generally speaking, it's modular. It interacts with itself fundamentally different, and they're trying to wrap institutional outputs, so like high margins, shareholder value, all the old things around that. I think that's eventually going to fail, if for the most part, for most of these large players. But what the feedback from that is that this is fundamentally a how do you achieve optimal scale organizationally from a design perspective, and they are showing us right in real time it's smaller. The unit of scale has collapsed. They're calling them high agency operators, the 100x engineer, whatever. There's a lot of names for it, but ultimately it's uh, highly specialized people with the right AI implementation being max productive, and then how do they interact with each other? And so we'll start with that part. Is that the form function mismatch is what is already here. This is already happening. So this isn't like a theory. Now, the to answer the first part, right, about what is self scale. Now, with reference to that, is scale, and we've talked about this a little bit. When I'm talking about scale, I'm talking about scale of desired um, commercial outputs, right, or inputs that are necessary for the output. So, in other words, how do you scale coordination of what it takes to achieve something? How do you scale revenues? How do you achieve economies of scale to expand margin? How do you scale distribution? How do you scale the internal maintenance of institutional knowledge and IP and all of those things such that you can compound those things? And then how do you manage resources? All of those things, right, that had previously rationalized in these institutional structures that are no longer optimal, right? So what we don't want to do when we're discarding the assumptions that those are built on is discard the things that they were really good at doing. We still need to achieve those things, right? That's still scale. Scale is scale. Okay. And so that's why it's called the unfirm, because it's really more of a hat tip. I really have no beef with it. It's just the market is telling us what it's telling us. And so I think we need to be referential with what scaled outputs are for us and what we are trying to do. And we can look at what those are with reference to a traditional structure. And all we're changing is how we achieve those outcomes. So I would encourage people to understand what scale means to them, like a scaled outcome for them. That scale is not the same for everyone, right? And so that's why I really do focus on what is a persistent approach that anyone can build through and on top of to achieve whatever it is they're trying to do, because they are the unit of scale. And so they have to create the structures and the bumpers around them that these institutional structures used to provide. That was the trade that these structures provided people in exchange for their time and for them delaying their compounding leverage over 45 years, right? And the compounding accruing to the equity holders, right? And so I think that is what scale is with reference to, and the self component is with reference to the optimal unit moving out closer to the edge. So in other words, let's go back to the example of let's take Block and Cloudflare, who really put a good they pulled back the curtain really nicely on how they are approaching it, and it's this modular type agentic system, we can call it, so to speak, with sort of pods or whatever. They call it different stuff, but that's generally what it is. And so those organizations, right, are, what are they doing? They're empowering these hyper valuable people, right? But what they have is still a form function issue with the incentive mechanism around them. They're still trying to arbitrage those highly productive people. This example is used to show you that we are those people. We can scale. We are the 100x operator, right, my friend? And so we need to look at what we are trying to do, build the systems that we used to outsource to legacy infrastructure in exchange for value and time and peace of mind and all those things. And then, so we have to build differently. So that's what self-scale fundamentally refers to. And I believe and know that is the optimal way to do it. And now it's not easy, but it's certainly the way to achieve it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Danny, let's build on that by talking about core teams. And I know that you often talk about the coordination of infrastructure behind or underneath organizations. You say that most organizations and organizational leaders are focused on the strategy and culture, but not necessarily on the coordination. So I'm wondering, how do you think we can reimagine the coordination of strategy and culture so that it all works together? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Man, this is awesome. I love this question because I think that is the age-old question that was generally solved for us through the more traditional institutional hierarchical scaling structure, right? It put bumpers on us, and it sort of told us ways that we could do it. What I think people are missing right now is building on what we just talked about, which is that everything that you thought you knew about how to coordinate is now different if you are desiring successful scaled outcomes, right? We're seeing that live. I mean, there are companies like Uber burnt through its entire token budget for the year in like 4 months, right? And then they just and so they're iterating, and so I think those are sort of examples of people used to old things now needing fundamentally different outcomes, which is restructuring further downstream than what they're even used to. And so I think what we're about to see is maybe not even just a misunderstanding, but a lack of capability to lead in this environment. I think we're shifting to where coordination will demand what I would call like a wartime leadership. You need people, they're not peacetime. This is not peacetime for organizations and coordination. This is wartime, so to speak, on their fields, because this is a survival issue for those large organizations who need to restructure, and they have shareholders, and these are large entrenched things, and the people in place were specifically designed to keep that thing going. And I believe that those people that got got really good at keeping the thing going are not going to be the ones that are going to be able to successfully solve this particular coordination challenge because of the root of the issue being much further downstream than they're even used to thinking about. And so I think organizations will need to look externally to different types of thinkers, and I think that will be challenging for people. And so I think that is sort of the maybe the deeper answer to your question, further downstream, because I think all the issues are further downstream than we're used to even looking at anymore, right? Is core assumptions. And so I think it's a misunderstanding about where the issues are and how to solve them, mixed with a lack of capability. And so I think, I would expect the most capable leaders to be trying to get ahead of it the way that, Jack Dorsey and Mike Prince at Cloudflare, the way that those folks are, and regardless of how you feel about Mark Zuckerberg, I don't speak poorly about people. But he's doing what the environment is telling him. He's following his feedback loops. And so I think not most people used to an old system are even really capable of doing it. And now, so I think I'll stop there. But
yeah, and you say, Danny, that you are at heart a builder and someone who really values operation. And you say you've had to learn that under high pressure or ambiguous environments. So I'm curious, how do you think those experiences have made you a better operator? And what do you think it means to really, operate under uncertainty, and leadership trust when things are uncertain? So what are your thoughts on operating under pressure and how that correlates to leadership trust, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
I think that those are the things that eventually have led people back to sort of like the like traditional dependency on the like firm on I guess the traditional trade-off and path of employment, right? Sort of like W-2 versus go versus building your own thing. That paradigm that it's not quite as simple as that, but just generally speaking, I think eventually people look towards those pressure moments or the lack of certainty, right? And they do their own risk management decision and decide that it is less risky to go work for someone else, and they're willing to do the trade-off in that way, at least in the short term. And then they whether they're happy or not, those are people have mixed outcomes with that. But that is sort of the old environment where I forged like my skill set through. But looking back now, and now what is more favored by this environment, I think it's shaped everything, and that's because you cannot fake your way through it. There's only bumps and bruises. You have to learn by doing, and just the failure rate is enormous, right? That's why my kids play baseball. I didn't let them quit, and they love it now, but because failure rate, I think the thing you learn is you have to fail. How you fail and how you protect people and your team and people when they rely on you is really, really important to leadership, because failure is not the worst thing, right? As long as people know that you actually like love them and care about them, like that will have been reflected in how you navigate those environments and what failure even means and what it's allowed to mean towards an outcome, right? So just most failures are just blips in success, right? But also some really hard things are just, you're going to fail at really hard things sometimes, and that's okay. What you wrap around it and what wins you get for yourself and your teams while you're pursuing these things and what they're left with in the wake as far as value accrual and during it is critical. And so I think what I've learned and how it shapes what I do is reflected in sort of my approach, which is expressed in the book and in our posts on augmented things. And that is have the feedback loops at every layer, every interpersonal relational, and then everyone that you need for success, they need you. The switching costs are gone now, so people can go do things, right? So you have to deliver wins for people. People have to want you in their life, right? From interpersonal matters, but also because you make them money. And so I call it return on time in the book. And so creating return on time, economic and non-economic, for the people around you is the most important thing, I think, to be able to work with people. They have to get that benefit, and it has to be unambiguous. And so what that means is I bear the risk of dealing with the ambiguity, right? So we need to have people around us who are good at that. Not, if you're not good at that, you have to know it. I am very good at it. I really enjoy it. Where I am most competitive is when things are just going crazy. Like when things are really hard, when there's a lot of noise, I'm very good at navigating those environments. And so sometimes I call my own number, and I know that's my environment. When there's just a bunch of unstructured data, and we have to find a path forward and have options. I don't mind being, people thinking I'm stupid because I had a bad idea. Bad ideas just get discarded, but they have to come out, right? And so I'm very good at that. And so you got to have people around you, if that's not what you're good at, that are good at that. And then you have to be good at other things. And then we have to have these positive sum interactions. And so it's shaped every aspect. But really, as far as building trust and having interpersonal relationships, all with the idea that people, that you not being transactional, but knowing that there are transactions involved, and being positive sum and holistic about how you interact with the people around you that you rely on and they rely on you.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know that you helped to build an organization to collectively raise over more than $25 billion in capital, but you say that it's important to emphasize execution over hype in a business culture. Would you say is obsessed with vision and storytelling? Why do you think execution and discipline have become a rare competitive advantage, my friend?
So, and I'll just add that those are two organizations, and so I was on the founding team and core team of both. One was and so there was two different organizations, but the cumulative number is correct. As far as the execution discipline, there's this meme with an astronaut pointing a gun, and it says "always has been." I don't know if you're familiar with that meme, but execution discipline has always been a competitive advantage. Now, the issue is that now what it takes in the competition is fundamentally different, right? It's, again, what is hard? Where has hard moved? Competitive the execution discipline has always been a major competitive advantage, right? That is not different. It's just, what are you competing in now, right? I think that's where, again, it's where did hard move? It moved to how you even do things. Where does your value flow from and through, such that it is able to create scaled outputs in an environment where the optimal way to do that is now fundamentally different. And so execution discipline is more important now than it ever has been. It's always been important. Now people are just competing in different arenas in order to achieve those outcomes with a lot more capability, a lot more capacity, they don't need the stuff around them that they would give, that you need to go raise money for if you're doing a startup, or go work for someone up your corporate ladder if you love biotech, whatever that your thing is that you want to do. At some point, you have to make these trade-offs because the optimal unit did that. The legacy infrastructure, like of institutional like firms, right? Without that, now we have to have execution discipline that we used to outsource, or that was more templatic in nature with what everyone knew to be true, in an environment where that is not true. And so again, it's critically important, especially it kind of what we were just talking about. This environment, what is one of the main features? High volatility, a lot of uncertainty. Market cycles are just not gone, but like market cycles are just collapsing. If you have pricing power, it's gone very soon. The things are just moving so rapidly, and a competitor can be your client that you just sold something to, one of your employees that you relied on, and then your business is gone, and that person just takes it, or anyone else around the globe that can just go do it. And so, what you have to be disciplined in is what will win. And so and why is that rare? I think because people haven't exercised those muscles, right? And so I think people who aren't used to doing it, it doesn't mean you can't do it, right? The book I talked about, it's very constraint based. You have to have constraint based design in everything. You can't design things that you can't do. And so it starts with knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at. And so I know what I'm very good at and what I just own for my teams. And I know it. I'm very good at it. And I don't think that there's anyone better than me at those particular things. Now, I know what I'm not good at, and it's also a lot of things, right? But I have this minimum viable like competency across a lot of disciplines, and then I have deep benches of people that I've built very good relationships with. That I build economic relationships with when we want to do stuff together, and they take me down to the domain. And so I think knowing what your depth is, where you create value up into other people's generalized competency, which has become a lot easier. I think that is a good way to. If you don't have this very rare capability to have like the executive discipline in this environment, this high volatility environment, you get some people who have like and provide value for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Danny, my next two questions have to do with AI research and findings and how they're applying to organizations. So I'm going to combine them because they're interconnected. So according to McKinsey Company, buddy, they say, well, AI adoption across businesses and organizations have certainly been widespread. Only about a third or one-third of organizations have scaled AI initiatives to the point where they're meaningful in making an impact on their enterprise-wide objectives, my friend. And when we go over to Forbes, buddy, they also reported this year that AI could contribute a projected 21% net increase to the United States GDP by 2030. So I'm curious, what do you think is at the heart of those numbers, and what opportunities are emerging for people like entrepreneurs or other smaller organizations to grow thanks to AI? What do you think of those numbers, my friend? And how can AI be a competitive assistant, so to speak? What are your thoughts there?
So I think those numbers tell me two things, right? And so I'm going to pull them apart, right, as far as how I talk about them. And so I think the first one is sort of showing sort of difficulties in transitioning at the enterprise level, right? I think, and we talked about it earlier, and so I don't want to like over hammer it, but again, it's important that there is a fundamental form function issue. It's a square peg into a round hole, right? Or excuse me, whatever. It's a square into a circle. And so I think that is fundamentally a difficult thing, trying to take legacy dependencies like shareholders, labor dependency and relations and necessity, public, reporting, margin pressure, market environments. There's a lot of stuff. Like for example, like even so Facebook, Meta, they told their employees that they are training their AI on them while they're in the middle of layoffs, right? Those are reality. That's an economically rational thing. A lot of people are engaging in that behavior at scale with those dependencies. There's a blast radius, and so there is a fundamental form function issue that is and will continue to impair people who want to keep those benefits that were a product of the old form function in this brand new environment. And so I think that is a fundamental issue that we're seeing is as they try to implement it into these old structures. Why isn't it working? Well, because that's not what it's meant for. That's not optimal. They're starting to learn that, I think, and then that will create other issues. And then I think there's also like just a normal learning curve. I think we got to give people grace. No one really knows exactly what they're doing, I think, and things are changing so fast. And so, anyone who's used AI has burned tokens, has wasted time. I think there are just normal learning curves. And then the technology, so it's hard. And then, I think fundamentally these large organizations, I read a great book called Loon Shots, a very old, not very old, but it goes, it's basically like a loss prevention bias. I think these large institutions, because of those dependencies, have a difficulty with change and adapting, and that's particularly perilous when the rate and acceleration of this technological wave and what it's capable of producing. When that's happening around you, I think that's a huge risk for them. And so I think it's a dynamic set of issues with sort of that first set of numbers about effectively like the lack of ROI on certain AI spend that we're seeing being reported now. And then as far as the GDP number, I think you nailed it. You nailed it. What does that mean for an opportunity for people? Because that's exactly what it is, right? People have, by and large, in a proportional manner, been blocked out of having access to these scaled outcomes because just physics, so to speak, right? The system and physics. It's just you can't scale without certain things. They require money. They require infrastructure. All those things. What does that mean? If you don't need those things around you, it means you can go throw your hat in the ring and be taken seriously and go compete, go disrupt. And so that's huge. That's huge. That means everything. It's very empowering. And so again, it's that mass democratization impact. And so I think when these organizations are trying to thin themselves out to compete and focusing on these 100x operators, what that means is you can be a 100x operator, right? They know it. They have their labor pool has people that they that can be 10x, 100x productive because of this technology. And so what do we take from that? Is that you can too, right? But what you produce will be scaled, but that doesn't mean it'll be good, right? Mm-hmm. And so again, it's now easy to produce things, but whether that is good or bad is still not easy. And so I think the most like a practical starting point, I think, for people on how to approach the environment again is to start with sort of a self-assessment, right? If you are the new unit of scale, right, and not a firm, then you have to treat yourself, so to speak, as a mental model, as if you're doing your own private equity analysis on yourself, right? And so really pull out what are you actually good at. What does the market pay you for? I call it radical self-reflection or self-assessment, and I call it datafication. It's all a process of looking at yourself without bias, seeing what biases you have, and pulling out what you have at your disposal from an asset perspective, and putting that in a datafication such that you can build architecture around it with constraints. And so it's finding what you have, what you don't have, and where are the constraints, and then designing systems around your time and your network in order to achieve scaled outcomes. And so if people are able to solve that downstream, right, then the opportunities above are right in front of them because they're just taking steps towards usually what they're good at. Like I'll take an example. I'm focusing on building with people who are that 100x operator, but they don't want to give it to someone else, right? And so they want to build what they have, keep the institutional knowledge, not give it to the labs or other startups, not get extracted from. People are trying to extract from people what's in their brain so that they can replace them. People are training their replacements. And so there's sort of an insidious dynamic going on if people don't really take a look at the secondary and tertiary order impacts of what you are in fact doing when you interface with AI. And so the opportunity is to take what is in here in your brain, what you're good at with your hands, your teeth, whether you're good at talking, whatever you are good at, taking that, wrapping it around a strategy and going to build with other people. And so as long as you're focused on what you are in fact good at, where you still have a competitive advantage, and I promise you, every single person, me, has a thing that they are a 1% best at thing. I tell you that because I've been working with people a lot and talking to people trying to get out of the grind for a long time. Everyone is way better at something than they think. They're also not very good at a bunch of stuff, right? And so I think the opportunity is within what you are good at. And it starts with knowing yourself in a dispassionate way as an outside observer, and then having those feedback loops and architecture to allow you to express that at scale.
Yeah, and Danny, I'm going to combine my next two questions because they're connected. And one of the reasons I was so excited to talk to you today was because I, like you, believe that today's traditional career playbook has sort of broken, my friend. You know, we're traditionally told when we go into an organization, we have to work our way up the ladder slowly, and then, you know, we'll fundamentally be rewarded. But you say that system is broken, and the traditional model for younger people is changing to build meaningful careers in the AI era. So I want you to comment on that, but I also want your perspective on, you know, how we recruit people, because you also say recruiting themes have changed, and the way that we consider work, as you have mentioned before, is sort of hollowing out, and, you know, organizations have to be more adaptable. So how do you think career paths and adaptability from organizations are interconnected? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
My nerd brain, it's just is like going off right now. I love talking about this. So thank you for having me to even talk about it. So I think um, a story. So at some point in my career, I realized that the people giving me advice, that generation, had basically taken everything that they did, that they told us to do, and created a market out of us. We were their exit liquidity. They financialized our academic education to where we couldn't get a return. They financialized our living education, or our living returns with real estate markets, the stock markets, real rate of returns, and inflation. It's all a mess. They financialized everything they told us was what we should do, that worked for them, to almost make it obsolete. And so what that means is I have ended up working with people who are more aligned. That's younger generations, and so I've worked with a lot of young people over my time. And what's I find interesting is that I don't have to convince them. You know, they know they know that the old deal is not even a deal. I don't even have to convince them anything. They just kind of know. I have to keep them from sort of like self-destructive nihilism for the most part. And so I think that young people know, but they don't have people giving them inputs on how to be productive with what they want and what is the modern operating environment. There is a lack of available resources on what to now do, because people are still benefiting from the old system, right? And so there's a weird like intergenerational situation going on there. But the idea of this traditional career playbook is just gone. It's a casualty of the structural displacement of what it depended on. And so a traditional career path, I think they know it's gone. So what does that mean? Again, what I would encourage young people is it's an opportunity, right? I have 4 kids and a wife, and who I love, and but what that means is I have dependents, right? And I also don't have a ton of time, and so I've had to over time compound. I've built systems that allow me to compound and recapture, right? But what do young people have? They generally have some time, right? They don't have a lot of dependencies, and so I think that what they could benefit from is go work for someone, or not, but go learn stuff, get paid, get skills, but also know that you can just go build things, but that doesn't mean you're good at those things, but you are good at stuff, and you can go compete in the market, and you can go knock down doors, and if there are no doors, you can create your own doors. And so I think giving people systems, again, so that they can scale themselves, lacking what is like lived experience. I have like older people have lived experience, and so it's I'm not trying to talk poorly about people and lived experience, and so it comes down to giving them an infrastructure such that they can scale economic outputs where the old quote career path is no longer viable for them. And so I think it comes again to where Hard moved, and giving them that infrastructure that's anchored on the feedback loops, time architecture, network architecture, the stuff I talk about in the book, giving them those things as a base approach, such that they can go express themselves and scale their outputs. Not easy, but the way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, Danny, my final question for you has to do with your own personal and professional legacy, buddy. And when you look back on your career and life, what do you want the first line of your eulogy to say? Or how do you want to be most fondly remembered, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
You know, after it's funny because I don't really think about this stuff very much. A lot of the like material success and things that I thought were going to make me happy have never actually done it. And that includes sort of like what other people think about me. I've just like a lot of people, I've thought that if this person would validate me, that or if I had this amount of money, or if I started this company, or I made this money, or I fundraised that, all of those things, just as soon as I got them, I was like, no, that wasn't it. The things that actually stuck with me, the things that and to answer your question, right, I just want to feel good about helping people with integrity. I want to feel good about how I played the game, right? We have a very short time here, and the max impact we can have is on the people that God puts in front of us, right, and around us. And so I think I just want to have operated with integrity and have impacted people in ways that I will never understand, and practice what I preached. And so what that means for how other people view me, I'm not sure that I really care about that, but I do care that I had a positive, lasting impact on them that was unique and memorable.
Fair enough, my friend. And finally, tell me if people want to get connected with you or buy the book. What's the best way they can do that, my friend?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Danny Carpio. My DMs are open there. On Twitter, I'm posting more regular content and interaction case studies about what this even looks like through augmented things. And the book actually just went live on Amazon, and it's available anywhere you can buy books online.
Well, fabulous, my friend. I want to thank you for engaging in an extensive and thought-provoking conversation about organizational design, infrastructure, AI, and everything in between. My friend, you are one of the most thorough conversationalists I think I've ever had on a podcast. So it's a tip of the cap for you, for your passion and dedication to the work that you're doing. And I want to thank you for engaging in conversation with me this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
Kevin, thank you so much. I'll take that as a compliment. I hope it was good, and I really do appreciate your questions. Allowed it. You really did. I can tell that you're a very, very thoughtful person. Your questions really allowed for a very deep level of discussion about this in a what I hope is a comprehensible way for folks. And so I really appreciate the platform here.